welcome to Fluketronic. Up now we're going to take a look at a question I got a week or so ago from a fellow Copper Flute player on the Facebook group. And the question was, do I have a problem with the second octave notes being very sharp from the first octave notes? So we're going to look at questions of pitch control and intonation. Now, intonation is kind of a fancy music word that just means how well in tune is an instrument to itself. So on string instruments like guitar, ukulele, you kind of think of how well in tune is the instrument as you go up the neck or higher in pitch up the neck. On a flute, typically you think of intonation as being a balance between the lower octave and the upper octave. And all flutes are going to have a tendency for the upper octave to be sharp. So flute makers and flute players have to do certain things to adjust for that. So first of all, let's think about there's basically three ways you can control the pitch on really any flute, but in particular the copper flute. So the first way is with the head joint. This, not every flute is going to be adjustable, but the copper flute does have an adjustable head joint, so you can move this up or down a little bit to affect the pitch. And let's see what effect that has. Now, right now my head joint is pushed all the way down, so it's going to be the sharpest. And I'm going to play an F note. Okay, and again, that's with the head pushed all the way in. I'm going to push it up just a little bit, and I'm going to try and play that F note in tune again. Okay, so I don't know if that's coming across, but I have to blow harder to blow that F up to pitch, because when I pull the head joint out, that's going to flatten the note. So depending on how hard you want to blow or your particular playing style, you might want to experiment with moving the head up or down. I typically keep mine all the way in just because it's easier. I know where it is, and it seems to work just fine for me. Okay, so let's talk about the other aspect of pitch control, and that's going to be how much breath you're pushing down the flute or into the air adapter. So the more air you push, the higher in pitch it's going to get. So let's take that F note, and I'm going to put as little air as I can and increase the pressure and see what happens to the pitch. So you can see, once you get enough air in, it's going to want to jump to that second octave. But if you looked at the meter there, I was going from a good minus 30, 35 cents all the way up to about plus 30 cents. So just by my breath pressure, I can make the flute play very flat of the 440 pitch reference or very sharp. So that's kind of the first thing is, pros and cons. The pro of that is you have a lot of dynamic range with the copper flute. You can play very softly or very quiet or very loudly. Flip side of that is your pitch is going to vary as you do that. So that's just something to be aware of, and really not much you can do about that. Lots of flutes have that tendency, recorder in particular. So if you're wanting to play in tune, you actually have a very small dynamic range, but if you want to use that dynamics, then you have to account for that with the pitch. Okay, so let's look at the octave balance and kind of what happens between the octaves. So I'm going to start with that F in the low octave and jump to the high octave and see what happens. Okay, so you can see here with just that example, you do see that tendency of the upper F being quite a bit sharp from the lower F. So let's see what we can do about that. Okay, so what I did that time is instead of just pushing more air to get into that second octave, what I'm doing is technique that Eric taught us was to actually change the breath pressure, not necessarily the breath volume, but the breath pressure. So I'm actually a higher concentration or a higher pressure, but less volume. So what that does is it allows you to kick up into the higher octave, but since I'm using less volume, then it flattens the note. So that kind of fights the tendency of the instrument to want to go really sharp in the second octave. So when I'm in the second octave, I'm backing off on the volume, jumping up on the pressure to make those balance out to play in tune. So let's play a couple of other notes. We'll go like the first few notes in each octave. So it is possible to play the two octaves in tune, but you do have to be aware of that technique, higher pressure, less volume to make it balance out right. There is one other technique that you can use. So we talked about the head joint, just breath control. The other thing is, of course, the finger holes. So you can flatten the note. So let's try that technique. So what I'm going to do here is I'll blow the low F, the high F just blowing hard, and then what I'm going to do is shade another hole to try and get it back down to the F. See how that works. So that technique, it'll work. It's kind of tricky to control. Well, it just takes practice, just like the breath control. So if you want to play a really loud phrase in the second octave, that is a technique you can use. So you can blow as much air as you want, and then just shade another hole below that to get it back down to the pitch you want. And that'll work as long as you have holes underneath it to cover, right? So if you're trying to do that with the high C, that won't really work because you ain't got any holes to cover. But from D on up, that technique you can do that to try and play a loud phrase in the second octave. So that's there. I have not practiced that technique a whole lot, so you can see there. It's very hard to me to control, especially if you're trying to play more than a note or two together. Just the finger gymnastics to try and make that smooth and work well. Doesn't seem like that would be as beneficial to me, but for a special effect or one blasted high note, something like that, then that could be very effective. So that's kind of it. So just to summarize, 3 different techniques. One is the head joint itself, breath pressure, and then finger shading. So I hope that helps. Give those things a try and see what you like better, what works better for you, and have fun with your copper flute.